Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
Just want to make sure we're doing okay there. So we're looking down on the earth, and before we go any deeper, let us not get caught up in the little. You always get somebody that when we show this, they'll say, "Earth is flat, dude."
Yeah,
and really all they're trying to do is just dissuade from what we're trying to focus on, which we want to focus in this one on opening up minds, not to a flat earth argument, but to the reality that we are living on a planet that we are a part of. And this is our home of our physical body in this density, and we are a cell on this planet. And right now, the planet is suffering. And Cindy was actually channeling Mother Earth today, and the whole time she was absolutely full of tears.
Mm-hmm.
It was very emotional. And, the love that we get from the planet is so unconditional, even with all the toxicity that is created and all the poisons that are spread about by this really atrocious system that we are in.
Absolutely. It's just really difficult to be in this kind of world and do the things that we are doing. It's just kind of a tough time for humanity, really.
It is. And it's a tough time for Mother Earth because she is going through her ascension process, and yet she doesn't want to leave any of her children behind.
That was the thing that really she wanted to explain, is that she was saying, would any mother leave any of their children behind? She was using it in that analogy, kind of like, look at yourself, look at your children. How would you leave any of your children? Could you leave any of your children? And the answer is just flat out no. And I'm already getting emotional.
Well, that's beautiful. No, share that with everybody, because we've been taught in the Western system, our father, our father, our father, and just we've, for the most part, the masses have been led away from the mother energy. And this imbalance is exactly what's wrong with this planet. It's not recognizing the divine feminine at all. It's through healing the divine feminine that we will be able to ascend up to the fifth density and escape this loop that we have been in, this nonstop loop. And we've referenced the movie and the book 1984 numerous times recently, because I rewatched it. Cindy hadn't watched it before, but it had been so long for me. It was like watching it for the first time, and certainly through a different set of eyes now after all the stuff that we've learned and gone through. The conditioning that is constantly being hammered into our brains and into the very cells of our body. It's nonstop societal conditioning that is all about separating us from our own mother, the planet that we're on, and the bigger mother too, the divine feminine component in general. And we see the corruption that has been spread so far, so wide, so deep that we can't even view things through a fresh lens. It's part of this conditioning that we're in. We can't recognize just how toxic it truly is. This system is so toxic. There's really you can't again put a tiny band-aid on an amputated limb and think it's going to do. The whole system has to go. The whole system has to change. When we look back into the ancient history and we see, say down in Peru, some amazing remnants of structures that are built in harmony with the earth. That they're not steel beams. They're building with stone. Why did they choose to build with stone if they had advanced technology? Well, how they move the stones if they didn't have advanced technology? Well, they wanted to live in harmony with the planet. They didn't want to harm the planet in any way, shape, or form. So they took what she gave, only what she gave. And this is something that we have totally lost sight of.
Right. You wouldn't just build things on your own mother without asking. You wouldn't just take advantage of your mom. She gives you so much. She gives from her soul. She gives from the depths of her being. And the mother just continues to give and give and give until there is nothing left. And if you're going to take advantage of that, and if you're going to just, use that, well, I guess you can, but that's going to be your karmic repercussion, something you will have to deal with. But I think the majority of us, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you would never want to do that to your mother. You would never want to deplete your mother after everything she's given you.
No, this is why, again, it's so important to really go deep and discover where the imbalances have been and how they've been. And when we look to, today's world leaders, understanding, again, that, there may be a handful that are salvageable, and not really corrupted by the system. But this system itself is made up with the whole intention of corruption. It powers itself through corruption. It powers itself through all sorts of negative energies and entities. And when we look to it, this planet is beautiful right now, but if we allow the system to run its course, it's going to look like this on the 3D. It's going to eventually be as barren as Mars is, but the evidence is there that Mars had life. There's water under the surface. There's all sorts of artifacts. There still are beings that are, still working the mines, so to speak. And when we think to Nibiru and we have remote viewed Nibiru and channeled information from it, Cindy's even gotten in contact with the planet itself, which is, believe it or not, a goddess energy. This is a feminine planet that has been just destroyed by, overt warlike energies, the system that has corrupted it, which ultimately traces back to that, grand dragon energy of old. But again, the dragon energy is just it's just a form that it uses. But the Anunnaki that reside on the planet, the Gigi that they used as slaves. Again, when we look to anything that's in the Bible, that's all secondhand. That's not firsthand. They try to make it out like the whole world. And some people will even think that originally the world was quote unquote Hebrew or Jewish, so to speak, and really truly believe that it started with Adam and Eve. But they don't recognize the fact that everything we see in there is taken from other cultures, and vastly predated by the Sumerian stories, which give far greater detail. But then look to the stories all around the globe, and we will see common threads about different beings that have been here at different times. There were times when these Anunnaki beings were physically here on this planet. We saw them physically amongst us. And then all of a sudden they disappear. Why did they disappear? Because they're fourth density beings, and the Earth was descending down to third density. Of course, we are on fourth density when we sleep. So, the way that our existence has been set up, 3D basically. When we're awake, when we sleep, we're on 4D. But there are aspects of us that go up to the higher densities as well. And all of us have source in us. Source is alive and well in every single one of us, even if we don't even realize that and understand that. So we have a connection all the way back to source. So when Yeshua said, I and the Father are one, and they wanted to stone him because he was blasphemous, it was really just their pure ignorance of not understanding how the universe works, because they, again, were under the illusion of the system that we get ultimately from Nibiru, from the Anunnaki Gigi, that, again, just like the Roman, I was going to use this analogy, which I've used many times, the Roman Empire, when they took over a place, what did they do? They set up, just like today, puppets that they knew would govern the people of that country that they conquered, yet pay tribute to Rome. They might station a few troops there, or they may just train troops of the indigenous people to police themselves, and then they go and do their own thing elsewhere, conquering, getting more vassal nations to send tribute and to pay homage to Rome. The Roman Empire expanded all the way up to the UK and into northern Africa, the Middle East. It was very expansive, actually. The Mongolian Empire of the Khans was even more expansive. Yet it was done through the use of the indigenous people policing the indigenous people for the Roman Empire. And it's the same thing today, as the Anunnaki may not be here amongst us, and there was a time when all of a sudden they weren't around anymore, and that was simply because we shifted in density, and now we're bouncing back upwards. So there may be a time when you see them amongst us, or if they do choose to come here, but at the same time, we will also be heading up to the point where we could eventually see the beings that are on fifth density, which cultures across the globe call as the ancient and shining ones. Why shining? Because they're more of a light body. And these are true benevolent beings. These beings, the Anunnaki, Gigi, and all their minions, like the Greys that work under them and some of the Nordic beings that they have conquered, they have basically, they're the ones that have been here last. So they've revised all the stories. They've changed and twisted things to suit their perspective, their narrative. They make themselves out to be the creator gods when they're not even remotely close to the vibratory frequency of the true creator gods.
Right. So as you read these stories that they've provided for us and look at these belief systems, it's all about really just sort of turning things around, and then you'll have the truth.
Yeah, pretty much. Absolutely. And, they even have things that they'll make look like it was hidden and they don't want it discovered, but they do want it discovered because it's going to lead you down another one of their twisted mazes to nowhere. The Earth itself is a conscious being. Every single star you see, every single planet that there is, they're all conscious beings on different density. When we look at the Earth, from a third density perspective, we see what we see. We see what appears to us to be a planet. But, on another level, it's a being having an existence very much like we're having an existence ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. She's very real. And when I channel her, it's just like any other entity that I channel. You can feel the personification of her essence, of her being. She's so loving and caring, and like you would expect a true nurturer would be. It's incredible.
We see the fractal nature of the universe, and many beings have tried to get this across, even through methods like the crop circles, just trying to get us to look deeper. Look deeper. There is a grand design. And here you'll have people that will, maybe ask you, well, do you believe in God? And you might say, yeah. And then they'll say, great, what church do you go to? And you might say, well, I don't go to any church. But you said you believe in God. Yeah. I don't think I have to go to any church. My church is the earth itself, the universe itself. And they might not be able to even understand that because of the conditioning that they've had. Or they might understand that, well, are you Islamic, or do you go to a temple, or, what are you? But again, these are all just labels. These are labels. Labels can define, but they can also delineate, and they could also separate. And so we have to be aware of that. When we look at, the human energy body, which is a Taurus, and so is the energy body of the earth, and so is the energy body of the entire universe. And our entire universe is just simply a cell, a single cell in something bigger. So when we're talking about creator gods, we are actually living in the body of a being. We're also living in the mind of a being, and that being is living in the body of a being, which is also living in the mind of another being. It goes on forever.
And ever.
This is the way it works, and we can see these patterns. Isn't it fascinating? Tree roots, and look at the vessels in a kidney. It's just amazing, and snowflakes, and that gets me, thinking about a lot of different things. The statement, ye are gods. Well, there's 100 trillion microscopic life forms living in you.
Uh-huh.
Right now, you are God. You are the universe to these beings. And so, we might envision them as these little squiggly things, but do you think that they envision themselves that way? Or, as I've said once or twice before, do you think that in their minds, they're actually driving home from work in a car or flying home from work on a plane? Just because we see something and it's so, so tiny that we have to use the strongest microscopes to even see it, doesn't mean it views itself that way.
That's right. That's just something that, when you turn your perspective and you change your perspective, or you put on a new lens and see it from that different angle, that's what we've come here to do. We've come here to understand things from different angles. It's beautiful.
There was a series of books that were written by a gentleman known as T. Lobsang Rampa, and these were some of the earliest ones that I was exposed to when I was maybe 10, 11. And, he tells of being under the tutelage of a Buddhist monk and speaks of being there in Tibet. And now I know I've been in Tibet in past lives and, always had an affinity for it. He's looking out at the night sky, and his teacher comes to him and says, Lobsang, why are you just marveling up at the sky? And he says, how could I not be marveling? Look at it. It's amazing. It's so huge. It's so vast. It goes on forever. Think of all these stars. It's just amazing. As his master teacher says to him, do you know that if we shrunk you down to 1/1,000,000th of your size, and you looked up at me, or we shrank me down to 1/1,000,000th of my size, and I looked up at you, this is what we would see. The same thing. And I thought that was, just an amazing thing, and I meditated on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, again, we're mostly vacuum when you get down to it. When you really look down to the smallest levels, when you look down to, the very smallest levels of matter, it only takes form when somebody observes it. It's just amazing what we have learned through quantum physics now. And it goes along perfectly with what they've always known in the Eastern traditions and also in the Western mystery traditions, because it had to be mysterious, because you couldn't come out right and say what you believed if you understood things, or you would be put to death. Pretty simple. And here we see Dr. Emoto's experiments with water and how water takes form and changes depending on the energy that we put out there.
Right. And this is something that if you haven't experienced this or learned about Dr. Emoto, that I really, really hope that you please look into it further, because at the beginning of my awakening journey, this was one of the first things that I learned about and that I understood. And just think about how much liquid is in your human form, and how that's, the impressions that you give it is going to be the shape of that form inside of your body. So this really changed my mind in a lot of ways, and it helped me understand how important my thoughts really are. They're critical because they're going to take on this impression. Very, very important stuff to understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we're putting out there creates our reality. And again, this is to a much higher degree than we probably know. And I'm always learning new things. And, we have to have an open mind to be able to go to new places as we learn more things and we discover, okay, I was looking at reality from this particular lens, and now I'm standing over here. The light is reflecting in a slightly different way, and I wasn't aware of this or that. So then we integrate this and that in. And there might be things that we let go of. There might be things that we just simply see through a new lens. We must always be ready to allow ourselves new opportunity for growth, because existence is simply all about growth and exploration.
It's beautiful.
This is all of that there is. Now, we are eternal consciousness, and if we choose to merge back up with Source, some might view that as bliss and some might view that as boring. And they might choose to stay a little bit lower in frequency and go explore. We know there are many beings that can have their consciousness touch and reside on much higher densities like seventh density and the like, but choose to really hang out the most in fifth density because it's an awful lot of fun, plain
Yeah.
and simple. It's above the negativity that we see around us here, but yet there's this creative ability when you look to, you know, the how we represent, say, the superheroes or the gods of ancient mythology or Harry Potterish. That's that fifth density type of thing, you know, where you can kind of manifest yourself new worlds to go and explore. Absolute bliss for many beings that decide to, you know, stay in that type of density. But recognize that, you know, we are co-creating all the time. So when we see the type of mentality that's on this planet, and you have basically, you know, 50% of a budget going to death and destruction, you know there's something wrong, and the leadership of the planet doesn't deserve to be there. And that's plain and simple. It's not that it needs to be tweaked. You know, there's a few errors. We could do a little bit better. No, basically, you guys suck. Plain and simple. You suck. You're horrible. You need to be completely removed from the picture. There's no salvaging this system. It's atrocious. It is so anti-life. You're not going to tweak it. But again, we got to get people to recognize this, realize this, and just step out of it. You know, if you look at this and the budget and what's being spent, what's the top departments? Air Force, Navy, Army. Then you have Health and Human Services. Then you have Defense, separate from, you know, Air Force, Navy, and Army. And it goes on down the line here. It shows you where their priorities are. Their priorities are all about death and destruction. And that's really what it is. Oh, well, they're saving us. They're going to protect us. No, no, that's the sales job. The reality is it's a means to an end to create a constant cycle that keeps power in the same hands and keeps vibrations low so people can't rise up and above. Did you know that Ford, the Ford Motor Company, was actually sued over slave labor? Yeah, happened in Germany, World War II. Yeah, that's something that might shock a lot of people. Did you know that President Bush's grandfather helped, yes, that particular person rise to power in Nazi Germany? Not only that, but, you know, was involved in a lot of things that are just horrendous. These are the top leaders in this world. Yeah, we've actually had two of these lead this country, or apparently lead this country, two from this family. And there was a certain company they were tied up in, IGFARBEN, which, you know, made Zyklon B, just trying to, you know, screw with the logarithms there, which is a gas that was used for horrible things. Horrible things. You know, the leader of the Catholic Church, you remember Pope John Paul II? Yeah, well, he actually worked for that company, tied in with that company. How about Pope Benedict down there? You know, again, things are not what they appear to be. When it says that Satan comes as an angel of light, well, here you go. And, you know, Satan is the system itself. It's the entirety of the system, geopolitical, religious, monetary. Absolutely. That's the biggest part that keeps us locked in.
Mhm. Absolutely. That monetary system is their bread and butter. It's their gold. It's their silver lining. So they have to keep people locked in it in every way, shape, or form possible, you know, um, emotionally, medically, you know, physically. If there's a way to lock people into this system, they're going to do it. And believe me, they don't feel bad about it.
No, because it keeps them in power and it consolidates the power. Since this plague upon the land has happened, power has been consolidated immensely. They've done hundreds of years worth of work in 2 years. And when we look at, you know, who owns, you know, one of the companies that's benefiting the most from this whole plague upon the land. You can see a picture here of, again, the banking world, and also certain companies like BlackRock and Vanguard who are out there buying up properties left and right. You will own nothing and be happy. Yes, yes, this is all part of that greater plan. And you even had some former presidents that got out there and warned us about things. And whether it was some sort of karmic warning that they had to get out there to alleviate some karmic indebtedness, or whether it was legit from the warmth of their hearts, it's up to each to decide. But this was a famous quote in the councils of government. We must guard against acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Potential exists for the disastrous rise of a misplaced power, exists and will persist. And then we had Kennedy talking about the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, secret oaths, and secret proceedings. So we go back to the Bushes, and they all belong to the same secret society in Yale, the Skull and Bone Society that supposedly has the skull of Geronimo. Why are they carrying around the skull of a great Native American leader as a glorified trophy? Or what's going on there? Just how sick, twisted, and wrong the leadership of the planet is, because it's not any sort of real good leadership. So this was a clip from Tulsi Gabbard, and again, one of the things that kind of turns Cindy and I's stomach is just, again, seeing the military uniform, because wouldn't it be wonderful if there were no military uniforms on the planet?
Right. Well, it's glorifying it. And even though the intentions are good, the intentions are right, behind that intention is another intention to keep people servient to another system.
The reason why, and I was debating, do we show it or don't we show it? Because we don't endorse anybody in this political system, because we don't endorse the system. We think that the whole system has to go. There has to be something completely new, completely unique. You're not going to fix this system. It's been inherently too corrupt, and it's not going to be fixed. It's going to completely collapse to the point of there being no resurrecting this, and that has to happen. And what's going to happen is people are going to break down into very, very small, almost tribal units, and then start building things back up in a fresh new way. And it won't be through the use of military force and power. It won't be through coercion and threats. And it's not going to be like what it has been, because that's not the way these 5D societies are built.
Right. But this is something where the words that she does speak, I feel, are worthy, if you can minus the suit there.
Yeah, and again, this is not an endorsement of any party at all, of any side, because again, we recognize that there's always strings being attached everywhere. And, we have to get past the ego. And, again, people saying, I am proud. You are proud. Okay, they start with that. I am proud. And you could insert whatever you want. I am proud to be an American. I am proud to be a Russian. I'm proud to be from China. It go on down through any. Whenever you start doing this, proud, it's inflating the ego. And unfortunately, in this society, it's so hard for people to think in an egoless way.
Well, because, the reason for that is the ego is all about our survival. The ego is to keep you alive. So the ego has purpose, absolutely. But it can also be misused and abused and easily sidetracked.
Yes. And again, it's through this division. I was starting to pull together a whole big bunch on the Tower of Babel again, but I've harped on that so many times, because there you have the controllers, saying, hey, can't have humanity united. We got to keep them divided. We have to keep them divided. And, that's such a big hint. Come, let us go down there, in the plural. And again, everything is generically changed to God or Lord, right? But that's not the original words being used. And just like the word, the people are making a Shem for themselves. And Shem usually translated into name, as if the people were of an inflated ego, and God went and just boom, crushed the ego, showed them, hey, you're nothing but slaves, as per the Anunnaki stories. But it's not necessarily the case. There's another translation that could be more like breath, or even looking at it towards the life force spirit giving breath as well. But we do know when we're out of these dark yugas, we live healthier lives. Part of why our lifespan is so shortened right now, obviously, the nonstop warfare doesn't lead to a long lifespan, as that cuts so many lives short. Millions of lives all the time, constantly, perhaps billions of lives, as we've talked about when we go back to the war that is spoke of in the Mahabharata, and 1.7 billion people is what the literal translation says were lost in this war. 1.7 billion? That's more people than were on the planet, according to the history that we are given. And again, it's a story. It's part of the script, because they have this plan that they just play out time and time again. So as long as we keep donning these different colors and go off, brandishing our flags, fighting each other, all we're doing is serving their purpose.
Right, exactly. So, I think people need to learn to find their souls, find themselves, find out who they are, what they're about. And the world that we live in is so distracting. Oh my gosh, it keeps us doing anything but finding out more about your soul, more about who you are. So I think that's what we really need to do, is continue to learn to go within and make these changes, because the changes come from within. They're going to start from inside of each one of you.
Yes, most definitely. So we will see if
Hey everybody, I'm just wrapping up my reserve duty here at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and as you know, yesterday, December 7th, was the anniversary of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, and so I've just been taking some time to reflect and to think about my brothers and sisters in arms who were killed on that day, and how that day of infamy catapulted our country into a world war that resulted in the deaths and suffering of millions of people. And I've been thinking about how infinitely greater the death and suffering will be if we allow the mainstream media, the military-industrial complex, self-serving politicians, if we allow them to lead us now into the apocalypse of World War III. So now is the time for anyone who cares for their loved ones, who cares for our fellow Americans, who cares for all human beings and wildlife. Now's the time to be reminded of the grim reality that we all face if we don't stop them.
So I like that she included, people from outside of this country or the NATO bloc, and all the animals on the planet as well. And we could go past that. And, when we're talking the NUKEs, that affects the very fabric of reality and affects beings on different densities as well.
Right. So because she went into that, and talking about saving further life and saying how important life is, that's what I really liked about this. So that, yeah, she is wearing a uniform, but she is talking about the importance of life, and all life for that matter.
And we're not saying it. She's one of them, but there are certain politicians that you see out there that were in positions of political influence during the fall and destruction of Atlantis, that are in bodies right now back in positions of power. Some of them are trying to stop this whole cataclysm, and other ones are trying to get it to go the way it did again, as these same entities will reincarnate time and time again. And there's many starseeds light workers that have been here in previous Kali Yugas that are back again, trying to help as many as possible to escape this nonstop horrible Groundhog's Day. If you guys remember that Bill Murray movie where you constantly redo it, well, that's what this has been like. These Kali Yugas are like Groundhog's Day. They keep replaying themselves until we finally recognize exactly what's going on and make the changes that we have to shift that whole consciousness upwards.
Yes, and all of it definitely starts with you. And if you're listening to this, we are grateful for all of your efforts and all of your energies that you have sent forth to bring about all of this healing, because believe me, it does count. It does matter.
Every single mother out there, what mother truly wants to send her children off to destroy others of her children? She doesn't want this. Gaia doesn't want this. Mother Earth doesn't want this. And, the beautiful benevolent beings, like the ones that are our main guides that we deal with every day, such as Mary, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Kuan Yin, Lakshmi, Isis, Aset, White Buffalo Calf Woman, they're all representatives of the divine feminine as well. They're all goddess energies as well, energies of pure love and compassion and nurturing. And we've been able to experience their love firsthand, and in meditative states that just they're nothing but pure bliss. It's so beautiful, and so many people have felt this when they've had a near-death experience or when they've actually crossed over to the other side. As one of our dear friends, Leah. Hi, Leah.
Hey, Leah.
She spent time on the other side, and it was pure love. And she had a experience with Yeshua, and it was pure love. And Yeshua is interesting enough, like we're channeling the mother energy today, and Yeshua is right there the whole time.
Right. He was standing right there. And I thought, these beings, they definitely are not about separating.
No, and they work together, and they're just beautiful beings. So whether you feel comfortable with Kuan Yin or Isis or Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene or White Buffalo Calf Woman or any one of the other goddess energies, you're just connecting ultimately with Shakti. You're connecting with the divine feminine on the biggest level.
Right.
And so let's send our prayers and intentions out there, because the other thing we've gotten from the guides is that we are probably closer than we've ever been to the real start of that global conflagration. So we're at a critical juncture right now. And, we know that they have this plan. This has always been part of their plans. And we know it's a sign. It's one of the last signs before everything crumbles. Because this is when people realize that it's all about lowering consciousness. It's all been about keeping us under control. And then what happens is, truly, the people walk away from the battlefield. They will no longer go along with this. There are individuals that do this all the time. Actually, I've seen some stats be brought up that in battle, like half the soldiers intentionally don't even try to really hit the person because they don't want to.
Right.
It damages your soul to be in these situations. It's one thing to defend yourself. It's another thing to fight these nonstop wars. If quote unquote bad guys broke into your house and are threatening your wife and your kids, that's one thing. When you're faced with that type of situation. But when we're going and doing the bidding of these absolute insane leaders, that's something totally, totally different.
It is. It is truly different, something to pause and think about.
And so, the mothers, all the mothers, the goddess energies, Mother Earth, they don't want their children destroying their children and thus destroying themselves. This absolutely breaks their hearts.
It does. Put yourself in that place of the nurturer. How do you want the beings that you are in charge of? How do you want them to experience their reality? We all want those that we are in charge of, those who are in our sphere of influence, to live, a good life, to experience as much as possible. That's how she sees us.
Absolutely. So send out your prayers and your intentions that love, light, and peace will spread on the earth, and the darkness that has enshrouded it be exposed for what it is. And may their whole system, their whole matrix, their money matrix, their political and ideological, their religious matrix, may it all be exposed and crumble so we could truly bring on a golden age here on Earth. As always, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. We couldn't do it without you guys and your support there. And do check out Medicinal Foods, the link at the top of every video. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.